Welcome back to my channel, everyone. It's a beautiful day. It's spring, starting to get a little warmer. We got a new season. We got a new set. Streets of New Capenna is the latest set in releases here, so kind of excited. There's a lot of potential, a lot of good stuff in here. This is going to be a full set review. We're going to go through kind of what to expect as far as top power cards in the set coming up, as well as just some financial expectations as to what to look forward to, what some of the chase cards might be, and wrap it up. We'll take some look at some decks that we might be interested in, and we'll have a good conversation about it. So let's roll that new intro music. Let's get started. Well, let's dive right into it. We're going to start at the very top. We kind of want to take a look at some new power additions to Standard and kind of Arena play. We're not going to necessarily look too much at how it's going to affect Modern or EDH or any of those type of formats. We're mostly going to focus on Standard and how it will work into the current meta. So we're going to run through the top 5, but I first want to start with some just honorable mentions. We'll get those out of the way. The ones that I thought were interesting and good, but just didn't necessarily make the top 5 list. There's 281 cards. We're not going to have them all in top 5. Though they didn't make the top 5, they were strong enough, in my opinion, to at least be called out and to keep an eye on and maybe formulate some new deck ideas around these. I do think they're interesting and cool, and there's a lot of potential behind them. So we'll run through them quick. We'll take a look at Elspeth, Luxur, Zeatora, the Blitz and Connive mechanic, an Offer You Can't Refuse, Riveteer Ascendancy, Ledger Shredder, Fight Rigging, Topiary Stomper, Reservoir Kraken, Security Rocks, Obscura Charm, Tainted Indulgence, and the Evolving Wildlands Sacrifice things. I don't know what to call them. I don't know what we're calling them. We'll figure it out as we go. So let's start from the top. These Evolving Wild Sacrifice Land things, they're cool. I do like them. They're very strong in the sense that, yes, they're common, but they are about as close to a fetch land as you can get in a Standard format. The fact that they come in, they sack right away, they let you look for a basic land that also comes into play tapped. Sure, you don't get it into play untapped. I don't care. It's a common. And you gain life. Like there's just so many different levels to it. And being that we're moving into a multicolored format where these kind of mob boss tri-color mobs, you're going to want a little more flexibility when it comes to mana fixing, and these are great, especially when it comes to a sealed format such as draft or even pre-release. These will help you out a ton, and these being a common, you'll have more access to these. They'll be good to pick up in a sealed format. Definitely keep an eye on these. Also, just remember, landfall is still in Standard, so getting 2 landfalls off of one card without any extra effort or life loss is fantastic. So, who knows? Maybe landfall will kind of sneak its way back into the format. That'd be kind of cool. Tainted Indulgence, our next one here, is a blue and a black for an instant. Draw 2 cards and discard a card unless there were 5 or more mana values in your graveyard. It's instant. It draws you 2 cards. My comparison is it is the Dimir equivalent of Expressive Iteration. Yes, you're not drawing 3 cards. Yes, Expressive Iteration is by all means maybe a little bit better, but being that this feeds into a graveyard theme with your discard, but also just being at an instant speed and draw 2 cards for 2 mana is pretty solid. So didn't make top 5, but I do expect us to see some play. Obscura Charm is a blue, black, and a white for an instant speed. So you can either return a multicolored permanent from your graveyard with mana value 3 or less from the graveyard to the battlefield tapped, counter target instant or sorcery spell, or destroy target creature or planeswalker with converted mana 3 or less. Being that Esper decks right now in Standard are already a thing, this is just another tool for them. I know that Esper Control is one of the higher decks out there, one of the top decks in the format at the moment. And this again is just adding to it. It does it all. It'll get you a creature back, permanent. Let me say permanent, because there are 3 color planeswalkers out there right now. So it will get a permanent, whether that's an enchantment, artifact, creature. It also has the ability to counterspell and to destroy. So it does everything that you'd want to see in an Esper type of card, and it's very versatile. Again, not top 5, but expected to see some potential. Security Rocks is a 4-mana 5/4 that says you can pay this for a green and a red if you use 2 treasure tokens. I don't know if you've looked at the rest of the set, but there is a ton of treasure. Getting a 2-mana 5/4 for the mere cost of 2 treasure, which isn't overly hard if you look further into the set, is a great payoff. So definitely keep an eye on this guy. He's a beefcake in the early game, and I'm sure that there will be some treasure games that will make some very good use out of him. Reservoir Kraken. Kraken is our next one here for 4 mana, 6/6. It is a rare, but it is a trample ward 2 that says at the beginning of each combat, if he is untapped, any opponent may tap an untapped creature they control. If they do, tap Reservoir Kraken and create a 1/1 fish that says it can't be blocked. Again, it's not amazing, but for the mana value by itself, for 4 mana 6/6 with Trample Ward 2, it's pretty solid and definitely worth taking a look at. The stipulation being that he's not going to be able to attack every time. I understand that. There will be a point in time where they can't afford to tap a creature, and he's going to get in. And plus, he's just hard to remove with the Ward 2. He's good at base value, let alone just getting a 1/1 unblockable creature in the short term. So long term, he'll pay off. You'll grow a board. You'll have blockers coming back. He will get through, and he will be an issue that they will have to deal with. Moving on, we got Topiary Stomper. Is a 3 mana 4/4 Vigilance. Again, just at base value, a solid card. But when he enters the battlefield, you search your library for a basic land card and put it onto the battlefield tap. Okay, I guess. That seems alright. And then, again, his kicker is that he can't attack or block unless you control 7 or more lands. That's why he made the honorable mentions. Again, at the base value, he's great. He's good. He'll do everything that you need him to. But he's useless until you get to 7 mana. So I don't know how reliably in this format, in this meta, that we're going to be able to get to 7 mana anytime soon. So more or less, he's a 3 mana search for a land. Hopefully some of these sacrifice decks will make use of that undercosted overpoweredness of this card. So he may still find some other uses in some sacrifice decks. We'll keep an eye on him. I think he'll be fun moving forward. That brings us to Fight Rigging. Is a 3 mana enchantment, part of the Hideaway series of cards that I believe every mob faction got. This one states, at the beginning of combat on your turn, put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control. Then if you control a creature with power 7 or greater, you may play the exiled card without paying its mana cost. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. If everyone is still on the Luminarch train, which I'm hearing they are, to follow that up with a 3-drop that does the exact same thing at the beginning of each combat seems pretty good. And even just, again, looking back at Topiary Stomper, where we're, for 3 mana, getting a 4/4, or for the Security Rocks, for 2 mana, getting a 5/4, we're already very close to the 7 mana, or the 7 power level that we need to get that Hideaway to trigger. I think it's going to be very good, and it will see some play. A lot of people are going to try and use this. Keep an eye on it. Look for it as a spot in some of your decks. It's a good card. That brings us to Ledger Shredder. Is a 2 mana 1/3 flyer. He's a bird advisor that says whenever a player casts their second spell each turn, he connives. Connive is one of their newer mechanics that they're bringing into this set, which is really fun. It says to connive, you draw a card, then discard a card. If you discard a non-land card, put a 1/1 counter on him. So it gets bigger. But at the very base of it, you are drawing and discarding. Some people think discarding is scary. It's terrifying. But think of it as you are whittling down the top of your deck to find the best hand possible. Drawing a card is never a bad thing. It looks like we're moving into more of a graveyard-centric kind of format meta. So being able to discard and selectively discard what you have in your graveyard is going to be very, very beneficial. So Connive is one of those top mechanics that I will like. And Ledger Shredder, again, anytime any player, so if your opponent casts their second spell, if you cast your second spell on their turn, he's conniving. Like, you're still making those draws, you're still making those discards, and he still has the potential to get bigger. So keep an eye on him. He's a fun little card. Riveteer Ascendancy, another one of these Ascendancy cycles. This one is for the Jund. We're looking at a red, green, and black enchantment that says, whenever you sacrifice a creature, you may return target creature card with lesser converted mana cost from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. You may only do this once each turn. If it wasn't once each turn, this definitely would have made the top 5. This being the case, I think that's going to hold it back into this kind of honorable mentions. Again, Blitz is a very fun mechanic. There's a lot of versatility with the Blitz mechanic. Also being that there is already kind of a mid-range sacrifice deck out there, I think this is going to be a very fun card. I hope it will see some play. I don't know if it will. 3 mana, there's a lot going on at the 3 mana spot, so it's good. It replaces your sacrifice, which is great. The down part of sacrifice is losing a creature. This is saying you're replacing that creature with another creature. Sure, it may be of lesser value, but you're still getting all the benefit of the sacrifice plus a blocker, or at least a body at the very end of it. Definitely keep an eye on this card. I think it will see some play. Definitely try and make use of it. It's a good card. An offer you can't refuse. 1 mana instant says, counter target non-creature spell. Its controller gets 2 treasure tokens. This is a pretty darn amazing little counter spell. If you compare it to Swan Song right now it's still a very good counter spell, and it had some gaps. Yes, it didn't target, you couldn't counter a planeswalker, and I don't believe you could counter an artifact either, and they got a 2/2. So they got a body, they got an attacker, and it was a flyer. Not only can this target both a planeswalker and an artifact, which is very relevant in the current meta, it doesn't give them a clock against you. They don't get a creature. Yes, they get their 2 treasures, and of course in a treasure potential meta this may become an issue, but when we look beyond to Modern or even Legacy, even EDH, or Commander as they call it nowadays, having just a 1 mana counter target non-creature spell is amazing. You don't necessarily care about giving them 2 extra mana, you care about card resource and battlefield resources, and this takes care of it all. Whether that's an Ephemerate for Modern players, or a Farewell for Standard players, or any one of the number of troublesome planeswalkers that are coming out or are here, such as a Wandering Emperor. It just takes that out of the mix immediately, but a counterspell without any real downside other than extra mana is pretty amazing. Keep an eye on this. Definitely look to be picking these up when you can. The Blitz Connive mechanic, just in general, these 2 mechanics, I know we really haven't looked at the Blitz mechanic, but it states for a little bit extra mana, you are getting a creature onto the battlefield with haste. At the end of the turn, you sacrifice it. When it dies, you draw a card. I think with some of the deck potentials that are coming out, and even just some of the sacrifice decks that are out there now, that will see some benefit with some of this Blitz mechanic, drawing an extra card and expecting a death anyways is just gravy on top of what you're already getting. So you're getting a haste, you're getting an attack, you're getting a draw, and you're also getting to use the sacrifice to a benefit. So Blitz, I think, is going to be maybe not a full-on deck theme, but definitely a mechanic that will see its way into multiple current standard decks, and also hopefully encourage more deck building. Encourage other lesser decks that can make use of this. Connive, on the other hand, is a very draw-heavy and graveyard-heavy themed mechanic. Again, we're moving towards a set of meta that is looking to utilize more of the graveyard, which is good and bad. There's some cards out there that will make you pay for that, that are anti-graveyard. But the ability to draw so freely in some of these Connive cards are going to be very powerful. So those two mechanics together, I think, are going to offer a good change in the format moving forward. That brings us to Zeatora, the Jund mob boss, is a legendary 6/6 flyer that says at the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice another creature. When you do, he deals damage equal to that creature's power to any target, and you create 3 treasures. Now again, this just brings us back to the Blitz mechanic, or some of these sacrifice decks that are already out there. It offers a bridge between the sacrifice decks and some of these treasure decks, and just melds it into such a beautiful card. I think this will be a great top end to some of these decks. Again, not good enough to make the top 5, but definitely something to keep an eye on. He's a very powerful card, and again, he just leans on some of these mechanics that are already good and just makes them better. Next, we'll take a look at Luxur Ghiadas Gift. For 1 mana, you get a legendary equipment that says, equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each counter on it. Right there, it's kind of cool. If you're talking like -1, -1 counters, it negates all of those. It keeps it at its base value, which is really cool. But the kicker being that you can equip a planeswalker and make that planeswalker a creature. That is crazy to me. That is a new aspect to this game that will change some formats and will be a huge power potential. I know some of you are like, it shouldn't be on the honorable mentions list. I get that. I understand. I'm not sure yet if it's going to have as big of a playing part in the current standard meta. But I know when you start looking at modern, when you start dealing with things like an Urza's Saga that can search us up for no additional effort, and takes your Planeswalker control decks and turns your Planeswalkers into threats. That just blows my mind. Most of the Planeswalker builds that I've seen have been anti-creature, hard control, with really no game end finisher. And this game end finisher, you're already playing with Planeswalkers. If they can't get to them, they're going to remain. You're just turning them into creatures that can attack and win the game for you, which is great. It's providing a finisher for your Jeskai Super Friends deck, or your Atraxa Super Friends deck, or anything Super Friends related. It ups the clock. It turns it into a faster clock, and it's great. Again, didn't make top 5 because I think Standard may not make as good of use of it as some of these other formats, but definitely keep an eye on it. I think it's going to be a good card. Next, we got Elspeth Resplendent as our last and final honorable mention. She did not make top 5 for me. She's a 5 mana, comes in with 5 loyalty. For +1, you choose target creature, put a 1/1 counter on it, and then choose from among a flying, first strike, lifelink, or vigilant counter and put it on that creature. It is a very good +1 mechanic. There's nothing wrong with it. For -3, you may look at the top 7 cards of your library, and you may put a permanent card with converted mana cost 3 or less from among them onto the battlefield with a shield counter on it. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. So shield, again, is one of their new mechanics. It's another counter that you can proliferate if necessary, that says if a creature were to be destroyed, remove that counter instead, and it doesn't die. So it's like a pseudo indestructible. It's a very good mechanic. Again, plays well with her to bring in a permanent and give a protection right away. Pretty cool. And then for -7, kind of the win ultimatum here is create 5 3/3 white angel creature tokens with flying. Again, helps that she comes in with 5. You're not too far away from it. I never really look at the ultimatums as something that's always achievable. Again, with more board wipes entering the format, I think this might be a little more doable. I like to see my Planeswalkers come in and affect the field immediately. Yes, she brings in a creature, but I'd like to see them affect the other side, have some effect on the other side to protect herself. What if you whiff on the top 7 and you don't see a creature? Well, then she just comes in as a 5 mana 2 loyalty that'll probably die right away, which is unfortunate. So there's a little bit of risk with her for as much mana that you're putting into it. Generally, she's going to probably be in an aggro build, so you'll more than likely just be +1-ing her, try and get to that ultimatum. But she was right there. She was right on the cusp. Keep an eye on her. She'll still be useful. She'll still see some play. She's a good card. Which leads us into our top 5 playable standard cards. I'm going to kick it off with Voidrend. It is a 3 mana, black, blue, and a white for an instant speed. This spell can't be countered. Destroy target non-land permanent. Yes, that doesn't sound amazing like a top 5 card, but when you already consider that the top decks in the format are Esper or a stone's throw away from Esper, this just slides right into their current builds. They already make use of... Crap, what is that card? Oh, God, I couldn't remember it for a bit. Vanishing Verse. And it plays right into their first 3 or 4 turns to get to their 4, 5, 6 drops that will end the game. It's just an uncounterable destroy any permanent card. There's literally nothing wrong with it. The reason why it's in the top 5 is because I think it will see the most play from this set. I think with the current Esper decks that are out there, this will slide in the easiest. It will be one of the more used rare cards out of the set. Shakedown Heavy made my top 5, as coming in as number 4 here. He is a 3 mana 6/4 with Menace that says whenever Shakedown Heavy attacks, defending player may have you draw a card. If they do, untap Shakedown Heavy and remove it from combat. He inched above the Kraken for the mere sense that he is 3 mana versus 4. He has Menace. And also the fact that he draws you a card and forces the untap. So you can block anything that comes back. When we look at some of these sacrifice decks, they want to make use of the power level of these creatures. And so the lower the mana cost for the higher the power, the more benefit you get from some of these sacrifice abilities. And a turn 3 issue that they have to either just let you draw more cards, but also can't swing past him is pretty great. So he made top 4. Again, he's on this list because I think he's going to see more play than some of the other cards. Being 1 colored mana allows him to be seen in more decks. So you'll see him in maybe an Esper build, or you'll see him in a Jund build, or an Orzhov build, or just a mono black build. He has the opportunity to see more play, which is why he made my top 5. We'll take a look at Body Launderer, comes in as number 3. It is a 4 mana 3/3 for Death Touch. Whenever another non-token creature you control, Body Launderer connives. Alright. Whenever he dies, return another target non-rogue creature with equal or lesser power from your graveyard to the battlefield. It may be just a soft spot in my heart. I do really like this card. I think the fact, again, that we're moving into more of a sacrifice build, there's a ton of board wipes. Even if you board wipe, all of these triggers still happen. You'll still get those draws and discards. But again, the self-sacrifice is a real deck right now, and I think it will become more prevalent moving forward. He just offers so much more benefit, especially when you're talking about the Blitz mechanic. Getting more benefit from those sacrifice abilities long term, just sitting there, he's going to be a huge use. And on the back end, if you need to block with something, if he needs to attack, if he gets big enough to where you want to start swinging with him, if they ever remove him, he replaces himself. With the cards that you've been putting in your graveyard from his conniving, as well as just your own sacrifice or progression of game, you're going to have good creatures in the graveyard at that point. He replaces himself with usually a better card or an equal card cost. I think he's very powerful. That's why he made it to my top 3. Definitely keep an eye on him, not only just for standard, but again for when you start looking at commander. I don't think he's going to make modern, but I do think he's a very good card, both in standard and beyond standard. Brings us to our number 2. We see Halo Fountain is a 3-mana artifact, non-legendary, let's keep that in mind, that says pay 1 white to tap it, untap a tapped creature you control, create a 1/1 green-white citizen token. You may pay 2 white to tap it, untap 2 creatures you control to draw a card, and you may pay 5 white mana to tap it and untap 15 tapped creatures you control to just win the game. The last one's kind of a long shot. Don't expect to do that too often. But I know that Boros aggro is still a thing, and I know mono white is still a thing. I think this is going to do okay. Even after a swing, to untap that creature to get another creature is always good, or just to untap 2 creatures and get an extra card draw. I know back in the day, that mono white deck did kind of suffer from not having enough card draw. It just ran out of steam, especially with all these board wipes nowadays. They fill the board, you lose the board, you're kind of done. But this gives you the option to at least replace that board and replace your hand, honestly. I do think it's going to be a good card, especially when you start again looking at Commander beyond this. I don't think it's going to be broken. I don't think there's any infinite combos. Maybe there is. Somebody will find it. At its base value, I do think it's a very good card. It does a lot of things that you're looking to do in an aggro deck with a final win con as well as a card draw option as well as just keeping your aggro going. It's a good card. It's mythic for a reason. I think it's going to hold some value. If you're that kind of player, definitely look to start using this in some of your aggro decks. And finally, we find ourselves at number 1, which is, probably guessed it, it's Obnexulas in my book. Obnexulas the Adversary is a 3-mana, red, black, and a colorless planeswalker that comes in with 3 loyalty. His abilities aren't amazing, but for 3 mana, you shouldn't really expect anything more than that. +1, each opponent loses 2 life unless they discard a card. If you control a demon or a devil, you gain 2 life. Nothing crazy there. It's good to get a little 2 life in or get them to go down on resources. Again, if they can't go down on resources, you're just forcing life loss. You can -2 to create a 1/1 devil creature token to protect itself, but also to potentially ping something off the board if necessary. And then for -7, target player draws 7 cards and loses 7 life. Those aren't all crazy. The crazy thing is, what happens if you get 2 of them? So he comes in with the casualty ability of Casualty X. I don't think we've really touched on casualty here yet, but casualty says, as you cast this spell, you may sacrifice a creature with power X. When you do, copy this spell. The copy becomes a token. And then right there in the text it even says the copy is non-legendary, so you don't have to worry about the legendary rule. Again, we start looking at our sacrifice decks and some of these big creature for low mana cost. This is where it starts to become an issue. Planeswalkers are annoying in the first place, but getting 2 for the cost of 3 mana usually is an issue. It puts a massive clock on them to either start losing resources immediately or start losing life immediately. Usually by turn 3, you're not going to have a lot of options to get to their planeswalkers, which means that they're just going to be an issue longer. And the more time that they spend on the battlefield, the bigger they get and the farther out of reach they get to get off the battlefield. I think getting an Obnexulas down on turn 3 is going to be a massive issue, and even bigger when you create 2 of them. So definitely look to start using this guy. I think he's going to be a huge player in the new meta moving forward, and I think he's going to be one of the biggest seek cards in this set. Definitely keep an eye on him. He's my number 1. I'm sure he's most of your number 1s. Let's keep an eye on him as we move forward. So for those of you who aren't necessarily interested in the top 5 or how it affects Standard or Arena, I know you're here because of our financial expectations, so let's kind of walk through these and see what we end up with. Now, do keep in mind, I am not a financial expert, nor have I spent any time in the stock market, but I have been around this game enough to kind of understand how power levels affect the game as well as just overall rarity and and kind of what formats drive financial expectations. I do want a quick disclosure. I'm not including any of the showcase or borderless or foil etched or blah blah blah. Those are all fancy cards. Yes, they're going to hold more value. Yes, those are probably something you're going to be looking for more. But at the base of those, you still have what is a good and bad card, and those will drive the expectations of the other showcase fancy dancy cards. Okay, so let's start pretty small here. We're going to do some pretty quick, just small brackets. Again, take everything with a grain of salt. I'm not a pro at this. Things may change, especially as new decks come out and new builds are found, as well as cards are broken. So let's quickly look at our 5 to 10 range. I'm not going to include all of them, but just some of the mainstays that I think will make the 5 to 10 range. I'm definitely throwing an offer you can't refuse in there. Seeing what happened with Expressive Iteration, this in my book will definitely be there. Expressive Iteration became a favored card in Modern, not only in Standard. And I do believe that an offer you can't refuse will see Modern, if not Legacy, play and be a mainstay in those formats as well. That being said, I do think this will drive it up to at least the $5 range or close to it. Very solid counterspell and definitely something to keep an eye on. Do not throw these away if you get these. Next, I'm going to take a look at Lord Xander, the Collector. He is more of an EDH card in my deck. In my book, I don't think he will see as much standard play as what everybody's hoping. Nor do I think he'll see play in some of these other formats. I think more or less he will be a commander card, which holds a lot of value. There's a lot of commander love out there, and he does a lot. I'm not going to lie. For 7 mana for a 6/6, that's not great on its own, but everything he does in the middle is crazy. So I think he's not going to break the $10 market, but I do think he'll be in the range of $5 to $10. The same goes for Jetmir, Nexus of Revels. Again, I think he's more of an EDH commander card. I don't think he's going to see modern play, probably not too much standard play, especially with how anti-creature and control-y standard is right now. But in a bigger format where you're allowed to have more creatures and it's easier to get more creatures, I think he's going to be an issue. And I think he'll be a really good commander and someone who is fun to build around. Definitely expect him to be around the $5 to $10 range. Riveteer's Ascendancy, maybe closer to $5. I do think it's a very good card. I think in a standard sense, I think this will see play. Maybe I'm overshooting this one. Expect it to be closer to $5. We got Titan of Industry. He's just a tank. He's not amazing. He's not going to see play in every single deck, but he's a beefcake and he does a bunch of stuff. That being the case, I think he's going to find the $5 to $10 range pretty comfortably. I don't think he's going to get above that, maybe a little bit below that, but a solid estimate is somewhere between the $5 to $10 range. Same with Vivian of the Hunt. On the Hunt, sorry. 6 mana Planeswalkers are a little harder to get to and aren't as amazing if they don't have some kind of removal effect when they enter the board, like Liliana. Mono Green has kind of fallen out of favor. Again, she'll be a cool card in Commander. I think she'll just having that ability to search a creature card, especially in EDH, is great. On a standard level, maybe not so much. The coolest part about her is that even though she doesn't have an ultimate, for -1 you get a 4/4 blocker or attacker on the next turn. That's pretty cool. 4/4 is pretty hard to get around, and she protects herself from the beginning without much hit to her loyalties, which is pretty cool. I don't think she'll be closer to the $10 range, but I don't think much above that, if anything. Elspeth Resplendent, 5 mana. Again, I don't think she's going to break that $10 mark. She's not backbreaking when she enters the battlefield. She is backbreaking when she goes ultimate, but time will tell how easily it is to get to that ultimate. So expect her to be probably closer to $10 again, but probably nothing above that. Oh, Urabrask. So 5 mana for a 4/4 haste. We're bringing back in our Praetors again. He's a cool Praetor. I like him. But he's not... He doesn't stall the game like everybody's hoping he will. Yes, technically you get an extra card draw. Kind of neat. But he doesn't really necessarily prevent any extra card draw from your opponent. They're still going to get their card. Maybe not necessarily to their hand. But any future draws beyond that, they're going to get that. It doesn't stop that draw. So he's a cool card. Maybe 5 mana is a bit much. It'd be cooler if he was 4. But I don't think his abilities are that backbreaking. Expect him to be roughly around $5 to $10. So let's take a shift up to our $10 to $20 range. Right off the bat, obviously our tri-lands are going to fall somewhere in this range. If you've been keeping an eye on the Ikoria Triomes that came out, this is the follow-up end to that cycle of lands. The Ikoria lands right now are $10 and up. This is mainly because, again, because of Commander and Modern, not necessarily because of Standard. Especially in a Standard set where you can't search these up, they're not amazing, but they still do the trick in Standard. They're going to find most of their value because of their use in Modern and Commander. Especially that these are some of the more sought-after color combinations. You have your Grixis color combos, your Esper color tri-land. Those bigger color combinations that we haven't seen in Modern yet, they're going to get a lot of play out of these. So really expect these to be probably closer to $15 a piece. Maybe not in the short term, but definitely long term. These are something you should probably pick up. Oh, again, my body launderer made the list. I love him. I love him. He's really cool. I may be overshooting his range. He's probably going to be closer to 10. But he's a cool card. And once you get to a bigger format like Commander, where more creatures are dying, and you can make use of that, and you're conniving a ton, I think he's going to be a really good card. Again, maybe $10 is much. Maybe I should have shifted him down to 8. But he's still a fun card to keep an eye on, for sure. Halo Fountain, I think this will be close to 10. I don't think this is going to be mid $10 to $20 range. Definitely expect this to be closer to 10. I think its rarity as well as the iconicness to the set, it's a pretty card too, don't get me wrong, will drive that value closer to $10. So definitely expect him to stay there. I put Obnexulas in the $10 to $20 range because I don't think he's going to see play in Commander or Modern. I don't think he's going to break into those formats, but he will hold his value while he's in Standard. I think there's going to be a couple decks that will come out with him that will love him. He may see a couple decks in Modern, but I don't think he's going to be a mainstay in Modern. Do expect him to probably see the $10 to $20 range as long as he's in Standard. And really, the only card that I had set for above $20 is the Luxur Ghiadas Gift. Here's why. As I mentioned before, Urza Saga, when it comes to Modern, is a real card. It is proving to be a massive issue. And for those of you who don't know, it is a land that comes in, and by the second or third turn that it's in play, it sacrifices and searches for a 1-mana artifact. So it basically turns itself into an artifact search card, which is crazy. That's part of the reason why Ozolith is holding its value as much as it is, because Ozolith has seen some play in Modern as well as some Commander decks. Luxur Ghiadas Gift will definitely offer potential to Modern as well as Commander. There's a lot of Super Friends decks out there, and I think this is going to see some fun play. There's a lot of potential in this card, not only just for the Planeswalker ability, but when you start dealing with -1/-1 counters and negating that negative attribute. So definitely keep an eye on this card. If you get it, hold on to it, just see what happens. It may tick down into the $10 to $20 range if nobody finds a deck for it, but in my personal opinion, most people are going to want one, and I do think I am going to try and play with this card. So keep an eye on it. I think this is going to be one of the chase cards in the set. This brings us to our financial sleepers. These are the cards that I'm not 100% sure what's going to happen with them. They're good cards, like on the base value of them, but I don't necessarily understand if they're as good as I think and if they're as good as everybody else will think. So let's start with just Endless Detour. The Bant, bounce a spell, bounce a permanent, or return a card from a graveyard. It's very versatile against multiple different decks. The reason why it's in the sleepers is because Bant is not a very large part of the format, part of the meta in Standard or Arena, not even in Modern. But if there is a Bant deck, they should heavily consider this card, which is why I think it's falling in the sleepers, because I don't know if it will see the play that I'm expecting, and if the finance will follow it. Next we have Angel of Suffering, is a 5 mana 5/3 flying that says when damage is dealt to you, if damage is dealt to you, prevent that damage and mill twice that many cards. I think she's a bit too risky when it comes to Standard. For that kind of mana cost and that power toughness level, she's okay, but the risk being milling twice as much is a bit scary. You might be thinking, well, you can make use of that mill. Yes, but maybe sometimes you don't want to make use of that mill. So I think it's a bit of a risky card, which is why it's on my financial sleepers list. I'm not sure if it will find a home. Hopefully it does. It's a cool card. Once it gets down, they have to deal with it. Otherwise, you will just basically never take damage, which puts a massive advantage towards you in the fact that they have to exert a lot of effort to try and get rid of this creature, giving you the option to swing at them as much as you want. I'm not expecting her to be overly expensive, but definitely keep an eye on her. All-Seeing Arbiter is a 6 mana 5/4 flyer. If for those of you who know this card well, I do want to compare it to like a Consecrated Sphinx for those commander players. Yes, you are correct. It is not as good as a Consecrated Sphinx. However, I do like the potential for as much card draw as it offers. It's not breakable, but it is a solid card. So again, probably expect that roughly around the $5 range. I'm not sure if he'll do anything more than that. 6 mana is a lot of mana. Bootlegers Stash. This one might be a touchy topic because I know a lot of people are expecting this thing to be crazy. A lot of people saw what happened with Old Gnawbone, if you remember from the D&D set. It's a very similar mindset, and it depends if Standard is able to make use of this card. Being able to tap your lands to create a treasure token is pretty amazing, especially when you're moving between turns and you have unused mana. You can turn those into not only extra mana for the next turn, but also just permanents. Having permanents and having an artifact build is a real thing still. Again, the potential is probably less for Standard and more so for Commander, but Commander does drive a lot of the pricing. If you do pull one of these, congratulations. I would say hold on to it. Take a look at Old Gnawbone and then just think on it, okay? Rabble Rousing. Another one of the hideaway cards that is another personal favorite of mine. It is a 5 mana enchantment that says, whenever a creature you control attacks, create a 1/1 white and green citizen token. So basically, it's doubling your creatures. Even on the following turn, when you're swinging with tokens, you're making more tokens. That's when you start considering that maybe Halo Fountain isn't that crazy of a win con. There are a large number of aggro decks in the current meta, between the Boros aggro and just the mono white aggro that maybe have kind of fallen out of favor a little bit. And this might be just a win more card for those decks, but I do think EDH token decks will love this card. It is basically a double your tokens card, which is very similar to like a doubling season or a Primal Vigor. Definitely keep an eye on this card. I think it's going to do some pretty good stuff, and I personally would love to have one. So, and lastly, we'll bring in Scheming Fence, which is maybe a little bit more of an obscure card. It is a white and a blue for a 2/3 human citizen. Definitely keep in mind that it's a human. When he enters the battlefield, you may choose a non-land permanent. Activated abilities of the chosen permanent can't be activated. Maybe not currently in Standard or even EDH. Humans are not really a thing. I know they're trying to make citizens a thing in Standard, but there is definitely a very prevalent human deck in Modern, for those of you who don't know. For you Modern players, you may know more about a Meddling Mage. This is very similar to that, but in addition to that, it makes for a very control-y, at least blue-white, human control deck. And I think I definitely will be looking to pick up 4 of these in the hopes of building that human deck. So I don't think he's going to break the bank, but I do think he's a better card than what other people are expecting. And lastly, I always like to just think out loud of moving into the set, just the potential of the cards coming out and what kind of decks we could be looking at. So let's just quickly run through some potential deck ideas that I'm excited to consider. One, especially right off the top, as I've mentioned before, sacrifice decks I think are going to be very fun to play. I think Blitz mechanic, as well as just the current decks that are out there utilizing sacrifice, I think this will up their potential even more moving into this set. They were good before. I think this is going to put them over the top. Behind that, I think treasure decks are going to be very prevalent. This entire set, if you look through it, is very treasure heavy and has some very good treasure cards. Now, we already have a couple treasure decks that are out there. Again, this is just adding to the current decks that are out there and making them better than what they are now. Obviously, just looking at the set, they really want us to try to do a token aggro build with some of the humans and the Jetmir mob faction cards and some of these massive token producers, as well as kind of offhandedly, I think crewing some of a vehicle deck and an artifact deck is going to be something to try. I don't think it's going to be great by any means. You could definitely do a meld between some of these aggro decks and slip in some of these cooler crewing cars, these vehicles. Again, I don't think it's going to be a good deck, but I do think it'd be a fun deck to try and build around. Give it a try, see what happens. Again, I think Connive is going to be a very good mechanic for the current decks that are out there now, but also just a fun mechanic to build around that will produce some very powerful decks. Undercover Operative as well as Aven Heartstabber will be good cards in these decks, but also just the potential of Connive and the ability to draw and discard will open a couple doors for some fun decks. So definitely keep an eye on that. Definitely try your hand at it and be looking for some Connive decks out there. And lastly, I put on Angels here. They had kind of their heyday back in Kaldheim. They were a good deck. It still is a solid deck, especially leaning on the Orzhov color combination. We're getting a couple fun Angels here, including Ghiadas. So look for some of these to resurface again and get some new fun updates moving into Streets of New Capenna. Well, folks, that's kind of all I got for you. Thanks for coming around, sitting through this. I think it was a good set review. I think we're going to have a really fun time moving into Streets of New Capenna. I hope you're excited. I know I'm excited. I know I'm at least getting one box. Hopefully you guys are going to be getting some good sealed product out of this. Definitely let me know what you guys are excited for as far as cards. Let me know if there's something I missed. I'm sure I've missed a ton. And I hope some of you are gearing up to do the pre-release next weekend. Definitely look through all your cards. Definitely watch this as many times as you want. But I do want to give a huge shout out to your local game store, your LGSs. Please make use of those. Be careful. The pandemic is still going on. Be safe about it. But your LGS needs you too. So please, if you're going to play a pre-release, go see some people. Take your friends. Go find a local game store. Have some fun with this one. But thanks for sticking around till the end. Definitely give me a thumbs up if you dislike this video. Tell me how bad I did down in the comments. And let me know of anything that I've missed in this video as far as cards or potential cards, any decks that you're super excited for. let's have a conversation down below, because I definitely want to know moving into this set. Otherwise, be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next one. See you guys.